Welcome to Slate School and our panel discussion entitled Responsible Innovation in Education. Slate School is committed to excellence in education, and we are delighted to present the Education Idea Lab, which is a new virtual series that is free and open to the public. This thought-leading event convenes leaders, change makers, and participants from all sectors of education and innovation. Thank you for joining us. We're thrilled to have all of you with us here today. My name is Julie Mountcastle, and I'm head of school at Slate School. I'll briefly introduce you to Slate School, review the webinar logistics, and then we'll hear from our four expert panelists. Slate School is an independent 501c3 nonprofit elementary school where education is focused on cultivating creativity, fostering ingenuity, and inspiring a deep passion for lifelong learning. At Slate School, we have formed a community that is constantly striving to improve practice, to create meaningful educational experiences for learners of all ages, and to change the landscape of education. Slate School convenes experts for important, authentic conversations about education, and these online dialogues, like today's, are free and open to the public. We're so delighted to have all of you with us today. I believe we have learners joining us from 6 continents. Now, I'll describe the basic logistics of this webinar. So we have 4 amazing panelists, and they have a wealth of expertise to share with you during the next hour. We'll begin by each of our panelists today giving a 2-minute introduction about themselves, their current role, and then their key guidance and advice about responsible innovation in education. And we'll then proceed with the panel discussion. So we invite you to submit additional questions and comments on Facebook, and we'll select some of those to ask our panelists today as well. So we'll proceed with having our panelists introduce themselves in alphabetical order. I am delighted to introduce you to our first panelist, Noah Bloom. Welcome, Noah.
Thank you. Thanks, Julie, and thanks, friends from 6 different continents. As Julie mentioned, my name is Noah Bloom, and I'm the Executive Director of Neighborhood Music School in New Haven, Connecticut, which is now in its 108th year. We started as a small settlement house serving immigrants in the Italian Worcester Square neighborhood, really giving life skills and building community, but through the platform of the arts. And today we've grown to be one of the 10 largest community arts education organizations in the country. We run music lessons and dance classes and ensembles. And over the last few years have really branched out into larger programs. We have a full preschool and after school program. And this year we launched a new arts-based middle school, starting just with 7th grade. Our new school is based on the idea that the students build a theater company. And from that experience is the platform for all of their learning. We can talk about that a little more later. For me personally, I've been involved in music my entire life. It's been a huge part of all my educational experiences as a student, as a professional musician, as an educator, and then over the last 20 years through arts administration work. So the answer to your question about being responsive, I think, is about understanding that people learn differently and have different needs, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach to education in any platform. I've taught one-on-one lessons for many years, and that was very obvious in that context, but it is absolutely true in a group context as well, and that's kind of where responsive innovation comes in. As a community school for the arts, we are really responsible for running to the needs of our community, so we have to survey them, where their strengths are, what's missing. I really believe that's the job of a community arts organization, to have a social contract with the community. And we really need to first understand what's missing, what are the assets, and how we can play a part to kind of fill that void. So really, if you want to be responsive and innovative, you have to start by being responsive to understanding your community's needs. And that really looks different in every community, which I think is an important thing for all our friends online to consider.
Great. Thank you, Noah. And now I'd like to introduce everyone to Eric Davis.
Hi, thanks again for having me, Julie. Noah, I kind of just want to jump into what you were talking about, but I'm going to stick the course. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Eric Davis. Thanks again for having me. I've played just about every educational role in the last 25 years: teacher, coach, counselor, mentor, camp director, school director, principal, founder, executive director, board member, whatever. Um, the thing I'm most proud of is that I've been a part of kind of running 6 different organizations, but I've built 4 learning organizations, all of which have moved on to their next generation of leadership, which means they're owned by different communities. So going back to what you just said, Noah, there's something, the essence of which has mattered to people. And that thing that matters has mattered so much that it's moved beyond the original founders into the new people over the course of, 10, 15, 20 years. Goal of 108, maybe 1,008, but certainly got to start somewhere. So really trying to get some things right in innovation, and that, like, why are we doing what we do? And I think I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I would say just the last point I'll make right out of the gate is we're all kind of motivated by what we think we want to make the world better, or a frustration that we want to, turn into a positive, whatever it is. I think as any kind of organizational leader, it is equally important to know what you will not compromise under any circumstances. If you are crystal clear about why you exist, and you are crystal clear about what cannot be compromised, you're playing within that field.
Beautiful. Awesome. And now I'll introduce you to Marie Martin. Hi, Marie.
Great. Thanks, Julie. And really, thanks to Noah and Eric to getting us off on such a great foot. I'm excited about the conversation and some opportunities to learn and to dialogue with those that we can't see on the call, but who are really representing, I think, a wide variety of interests and areas. So really excited to be a part of this. So as Julie mentioned, my name is Marie Martin, and I direct education and training activities at the Vanderbilt University Institute for Global Health, where I also run a global health track in our Master of Public Health program. And so I really find myself in academia. I'm an assistant professor of health policy, and find my niche at this kind of unique intersection of education, global health, and policy. So maybe wear a slightly different hat. And I think one of the exciting parts of this conversation will be, much like Eric mentioned, like finding where we all have synergies and can learn from each other and really innovate in responsible ways. So my work really focuses broadly on building human capacity to principally to improve health outcomes in low resource settings. And I do that at 3 kind of distinct levels: at the individual student level, to be more effective practitioners and leaders, helping them to acquire durable competencies, develop strong toolkits; at an institutional level at Vanderbilt, to build high-level training programs, being innovative and responsive, as my colleagues in the call mentioned, and also working with low and middle income country partners. So helping to build capacity on the ground locally to effectively tackle health issues through academic program development, research training, policy development. So at a number of different levels. And I would say my key advice that I've learned kind of doing this over the past 20 years is don't innovate just to innovate. Really be methodical. As Noah and Eric said, assess the needs of your stakeholders, the root issue that you're trying to address. Think about sustainability, think about access and equity and impact. But innovation, I think that we fall victim to this. In academia, we're oftentimes responding to requests for grant proposals that are all around innovation. And so to always hold that intention with your ultimate goal and the communities that you're intending to serve, and really thinking about why you're doing what you're doing, and having that be a cornerstone of your action.
Well said. Yes. And now just introduce you to Cameron Smith. Hi, Cameron.
Hi, Julie. Thanks for having me with the panel.
My pleasure.
I am coming to you virtually from the Logan Square neighborhood of Chicago today. I am the co-founder and a school parent at Bennett Day School, I am living the dream of work and home converging with my first and fourth grade sons, who were an inspiration, in fact, to create Bennett Day School many years ago now. But our school is located in the heart of the Fulton Market neighborhood of Chicago, just a few blocks north of Google's Midwest headquarters. I created the school going on 6 years ago now. I really wanted a school that was dedicated to creativity and innovation, where kids would really learn by doing. They would construct learning alongside their teachers. And we are inspired. There's a pedagogical progressive model called Reggio Emilia. And so you learn from the environment around you. You take many cues from the students, and curriculum often emerges from the students. And so learning is emerging at home as we speak. But we do focus on competency-based grading, or competency-based education, if you will. That constant feedback loop of, are you reaching, approaching, have you mastered things to depth and mastery? So it enables us to take a bit of a best of approach too. So whether it's Singapore math, because we think that's a great math program, or responsive classroom for emerging curriculum, that's what we do. So we're pre-K to 12th grade. We're 250 students today, and growing quickly. To answer the second question about responsible innovation, if you will, I thought I'd give an example or two just from a few years ago. We created an R&D arm of the school called Bennett Labs, because we actually found, to use Marie's word about being methodical, that we had a lot of ideas, and they were emerging just from kids and teachers learning together. And we felt like, with the mission of the school being around advancing creativity and innovation, how could we bring more of those to the world? And in the current state of the world, we feel even more called to do that, if you will. So Bennett Labs has created a number of things that we share with the world. A couple quick examples of that for responsible innovation that just came out of learning at school. We created an app. It's an educational software app called Osmo Kaleidoscope. That teaches kids about reflection and refraction and symmetry. We've been giving it away just for free the last 4 to 6 weeks. It's in over 40,000 homes. So we feel great about that, where we have a couple hundred students and families at Bennett. But if we can share that with the world, and we get feedback on that and can make our own experience better, and then the loop continues, that's a beautiful thing. We created a storytelling game because we couldn't find a deck of cards to teach kids how, the 5 W's for who, what, where, when, and why. So we made a deck. So there's Story Dealer. So you can get that. And then certainly last but not least, and very timely, is Bennett Live. We've brought programming for families to life in concert with responsible innovation. So every day on our Facebook page, on the Bennett Day School Facebook page, and then on YouTube, we have creative play for 3 to 6 year olds in the mornings, and then in the afternoon, either live or recorded, we have project-based learning, and more to come for high school students. But to us, that's responsible innovation, and we feel more called to it than ever right now.
Awesome. Cameron, that's so great. I'm just going to continue. I'm just going to jump right in, because I'm interested, because, you're mentioning all these incredibly new, innovative programs. And I know when I'm looking at my students that I'm trying to authentically assess what's getting through, what's happening. And I know you talked about a competency kind of curriculum for assessment, but how do you know for yourself? How do you know when you're doing something nobody else has ever done, or you're doing something differently than anyone else has ever done it? How do you know that you are actually getting to the quality that you're really hoping for?
Yeah, I'll answer briefly, and then I can see going down the list here, people have their own insights here too. But our kids love to learn, and I think more than ever in distance learning or remote learning, and I'm trying to think of different words for that. So actually, people in the chat wanted to help us come up with better names.
Yep.
Because I don't feel remote, I don't feel distant, but I'd love to come up with a better term for it. But my children, I know as a parent, are still really engaged in school. So the carrot and stick is not there for traditional letter grades anymore. I think we are finding more than ever middle and high school kids, for lack of a better term, maybe checked out because what used to motivate them, and now they've been told it's pass fail, it's not there. And, it's like Alfie Kohn told us, it's kind of a crutch to use grades to motivate kids. It's like, you gotta cultivate this intrinsic love of learning. And so I think at its core, when you see your kids loving to learn and pushing you, and they keep iterating, they're not afraid of failure. It's not even failure, it's just a step, to learn from. I think you see it with your own eyes, and if our kids are, going to be retiring in 2070, like sitting in desks in rows, even virtually, is not going to get it done.
Right. Awesome. So I guess that makes me wonder. So Eric, when you are when you're motivated to innovate, when you're motivated to create something, I know like the need for change can come from lots of different places, lots of different headspaces, but I'm just wondering what for you, if you look back and see a theme in your creativity, what for you has been the greatest motivator?
Crisis.
Yeah.
Like right now, I'm in the middle of 5 different projects that we're bringing to market. And as Cameron just said, the demands of the world are real. If you live in the world and you pay attention to what's actually happening and you listen to people and you have empathy, you're going to be working on things, whether you're contributing to something that already exists or you're bringing a wrinkle on something else into the world. That's 100%, what now, if I go back and I think, over the course of a 25-year career of social impact, like constantly working on these types of organizations and being in a, as Denzel Washington says, always falling forward, I want to fail. I learned I wasn't, I was a terrible student growing up, but I was an athlete, and I learned very early on in my athletic career, not about winning, but about being on a team. And I was a team player for years. And I think about some of the lessons that we learned there. And one was in ball handling. I was a point guard in basketball, and my favorite coach I ever had in practice, if we weren't losing the ball, he'd say, "You're not pushing yourself." And I'd say, well, I mean, like, and if I was giving him a hard time, I'd be like, why do you, I'm sweating, whatever. He'd be like, "You're not losing the ball." Like, the simple thing I'm looking for is you're not pushing beyond what you already know you can do. Another one I heard the other day is somebody was talking about doing push-ups and, exercise. And they said, don't start counting till it hurts. And I thought, man, I've been counting from 1 because I'm propping myself up from the first one I do. But don't start counting till it hurts is such a different mindset. It's like, we already know the world can function in these ways. I'm motivated by what I don't know. I'm motivated by what we don't know, or what we can do better. And so I think a lot of it comes there. And then the other just macro thing, which I think is very precise right now, is just, I grew up in downtown Chicago. I grew up in a city, and I grew up as, privileged in every way. And somehow I grew up with an awareness, both of what I had and also of what other people don't. And that awareness grew and grew. And I've been very fortunate to serve across spectrums throughout my career and to try to find things that matter. Again, I'll say, like, the essence of this thing, it matters to people. It matters across rich, poor, black, white, whatever. It matters. So those are the kinds of things that I tend to work on.
So Eric, I just have to follow up. So if you are motivated by crisis, if it's like, big things are happening, I've got to get busy, I've got to innovate here, people are in need, how do you manage the stress? How do you manage the stress if you're going from crisis?
There's a PG answer, and then there's an R answer. I'll give the PG answer. Actually, so I'll give you my honest answer. Over the last few years, I have felt more intense stress, anxiety, depression due to what I feel is a tilt in the world and the way things I thought were trending, and just seeing that, no, in point of fact, we're actually in a bad poker game, and the tilt is intense right now, and the shift of all of this, everything. So the single biggest thing that has grounded me is my kids. Just my love for my kids and the joy I see in them every day. Like truly, when my wife and I are frustrated either with each other or with the world, it takes a little laugh. It takes a voice that is like these small, beautiful, hopeful voices. And I'm not trying to be cliche. That is actually the single biggest de-stressor I have in my life.
Yeah, that's
And then
what-
I live in nature, so that's the other big one.
yeah, awesome. So I guess this question could be for everybody, I think. And you know, I guess if I'm being absolutely honest, I would say, there are some characteristics in my personality that I was born with or grew over time that have served me well in my work. And there are some that I'm constantly actually on the lookout for. Like, there's, pride over there. It's getting in my way. I'm not able to hear that criticism right now. So but I'm wondering, for all of you, what are some of the personal attributes that you think make you a good leader, and maybe what are some of the things, if you're bold enough to share, you fight with in yourself to be a good leader? So I'll just let anybody who wants to start. Okay, I'll point to someone.
I'll jump in.
Hey, Murray.
And actually, I might build off what Eric had mentioned about playing sports. So I played soccer all my life, has been a huge part of who I am. And I think that like him and like many who have played on team sports, it conditioned you to think beyond yourself. And I think that one of the things that I bring from that experience into my role directing programs is that I can't do it alone. I have to have a strong team that trust each other, and it starts with me trusting them and creating an open and inclusive dialogue and team. But along with playing soccer and playing on a team, I've always been very competitive, because that's essential component to many of the athletic enterprises that we're part of. And so reconciling that competition can be used for great things, to spur innovation, to spur great ideas, to really move you forward. It also is a double-edged sword. And recognizing that, at least for me, I have to always keep that in check and be very aware of how that can be both beneficial but also limiting. So.
Yeah, the balance of that. Yes. All right, let's see.
I'll jump in. You asked about leadership, and one of my favorite definitions of leadership comes from John McCann. I don't know if any of you guys have ever worked with John McCann, who runs Partners in Performance down in Blacksburg, Virginia. And I worked with him at times for the National Guild for Community Arts Education, where he's been a panelist many times, and I did a leadership institute with him. And he had said that leadership is behaving in ways that bring people together to move things forward. And that really struck me early in my career. I never thought I could be a quote leader, because I didn't believe in leading with a heavy hand. And when I heard that, it kind of gave me peace about that you could lead by bringing people together. And that's something I always think about, which is paying attention to all of the wisdom in the room, which is really, really important, especially at a time like now when we're isolated and sometimes we're in our own heads. There's wisdom all around us and we have to connect to it. And this morning I was thinking about the ladder of inference. I'm sure everyone knows the ladder of inference, which is a pathway towards making decisions. And on one hand, you have this giant pool of available information. And on the other hand, you have conclusions. So that's when the decision is made. And you move up from available information toward, I'm making a conclusion, and you move down the ladder towards all the available information through inquiry, through asking questions. And as a leader, that is, I would always rather move towards the available pool of information through inquiry state of mind. But certainly as an artist, that was my training, you know.
Mhm.
There's always more to learn, and the more you learn, you realize you don't know much, and you make a statement, and then you ask more questions. So in the process of leading, I think that's just always a really important thing, is how we ask questions to build on all the things we don't know and all the knowledge from each other. And I think for me, the frustrations come from never being to fully fulfill all the needs in the world and all the needs, and we keep doing the little things we need to do, even when we know there's so much more that needs to be done.
Yes, yes.
I was just going to add, I think, like you were just saying, Noah, asking questions, it's about listening as a leader. Listening more than, I think as a leader, it can be easy to talk a lot, and you need to listen to the people around you. I mean, having like a meeting is about two-way communication, virtually or in person. If you're just talking, you could have delivered that in an email or in writing. So if it's with a big group of people, there are tools to poll your audience or otherwise, but it needs to be a two-way street, and you need to listen, whether it's a small group or a big group, I would offer. And then particularly right now, as Eric told us about all the projects he's juggling, in crisis time, speed and agility are key, I would submit. And done is much better than perfect. And right now, I think about, all our essential workers, healthcare, grocery, teachers. We've been in distance learning at Bennett for a month already. I mean, it was heroic over a weekend to stand it up. But speed and agility in time of crisis, done is better than perfect to provide something the world needs, as opposed to, I don't know, Marie, maybe you could comment too, and whether it's in K-12 academia or higher ed, sometimes we can get in our own heads and then we want to get it perfect, but right now it's done is better than perfect. I'd submit.
Yeah, agreed.
Can I add on something here?
Yes, of
Okay.
course.
So thank you all. This is Julie. Thanks again for inviting. This is great.
I'm so happy
I
you're
hope
here.
I hope the people watching are getting something too. I know we're all jotting down pages of notes.
I know.
Okay, couple of things that really stood out to me. So Marie, first, I want to go back to the point about competition, which is this is like 20 years, I have thought that collaboration is the highest form of competition. And by that, I mean, if I am truly a good collaborative partner to you, then I am pushed by your greatness to bring out my greatness. And if I am not bringing my greatness to the party, then I am not adequately collaborative. And that means that I am not fueled by the competitive spirit, which means I recognize other greatness in the world and I want to get there. So just first something about that. And then Cameron, to what you just said, yes, 100%. Let's get something out there and try to meet this need right now, knowing full well that most of the solutions people are immediately turning to in this current crisis are not the same solutions that are going to work for them in 2 years. That's okay. They still need a solution today. GCE Lab School, the school we built, we're 10 years old now. We've been doing we've had an online curriculum since the first day we opened the doors. This is part of our model. We didn't do it because it was sexy. We did it because we thought it made sense in the world we saw evolving. Now we see this race to get there, and what I admire is that the teacher or the school is going to turn to their colleague and say, what are you using? What can we use today? That's not the same kind of thinking that is going to lead them to success in 2 years. So there's really something to recognize. We need the immediate issue resolved, which is different from how we strategize and build our operations for the next 10 years, 20 years, whatever. And then the last thing, I want to go back to what Noah said. One of the things that has most poignantly stood out to me in my last few roles is the critical nature of empathetic management. And when you talk about feedback loops, Cameron or Noah, you're talking about being a part of that. I hear this phrase, which to me is becoming core to what I try to help people do, which is to see what's happening and not only jump to a conclusion, but actually make the effort to see the world through your colleagues' eyes, through somebody else's experience. And before you update this new product, communicate it internally. Before you make this announcement to the parents about what's happening, make sure your team is on board and has expressed their concerns. And this sort of thing saves so much conflict and drama and downstream challenge. And that's all just about actually having empathy for the people we work with. So a few things that you guys are making me think of.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Add one thing before asking how Eric or Cameron or Marie or I evaluate programs. How do we really do that without, and I'm just thinking about what Eric is saying. One of the things we all forget to do sometimes is ask the students. And that kind of speaks to what Eric is saying is, we might want to know how they're experiencing the situation, and that although that doesn't work so well for funders, it's actually a pretty valid way to understand the dynamics of the experience. I was just seeing, everyone knows what a program logic model is. You're writing grants and you write this program logic model, and I was just at the school where they had the kids draw pictures. So what the inputs, what did the kids feel like before the activity? Then the activity, they drew the picture of what they were doing. And then the outputs were how they felt at the end of the experience. And all the kids were really sad, and they drew all these horrible pictures of their experience. But then the program was like, our program's great. And that actually wasn't what was going on, but it was a very simple way to take away the words and just actually understand how the students were experiencing things. So I just wanted to piggyback on what Eric was saying about actually asking the people you're relating to about what their experience is like, trying to see it through their eyes.
I think that's a lot of transparency too. I think we have to be transparent. We have to say, okay, we're getting something out there. This might not be the ultimate thing. I'm likely to make mistakes. I'm acting in a way to try and make something happen now, but it's likely not, as you said, not to be the thing you use in 2 years, but to be open about that and to have a dialogue with all of the stakeholders about how it can be better. Instantly, you have a world full of partners. And so I think, I love the way you're talking about collaboration. I think it's especially beautiful currently. Marie.
And I would love to build off that, because this idea, even my son, when he was 8 or so, created a log frame in school, and I actually have it up on my wall at work, because I feel like even the most simplistic log frame can help us order our thinking and imagine, to your point, like, how do we achieve these goals? And we can start thinking about it. I'm a scientist, so I think about things systematically, but I think, for any of us, imagining our assumptions, our goals, how we know if we've met those goals, those are really critical components to understanding success, not just as an individual, but as a community. And I've been in my role at the Institute for Global Health for around 10 years. And as I mentioned early on, much of what we do is build capacity through partnerships in low and middle income countries. And maybe around 2012 or so, we were putting in a grant application, a response to a CDC award to build the first master public health program in Guyana. And we built a log frame with the university as we were putting in our proposal. And it was the first time we had done this. Oftentimes it had been us developing the log frame, asking for feedback, and it was always positive. There was virtually never anything that needed to be addressed. And a lot of that was around kind of cultural issues, power dynamics, and it wasn't healthy, And this shift of us developing a log frame together, we addressed all of those assumptions in real time. All of the challenges that we saw that were real on the ground that we couldn't see, and vice versa, we addressed as we built something together, and it set us up for incredible success. And success as defined by our community partner. not by us. And what a eye-opening experience that was. And since that point, I have never submitted a grant or a project proposal without creating a log frame with my partners. So this requires a lot more work on the front end, but I think to your points, it ensures that it is truly collaborative. And I love this competition and collaboration integration, Eric. I'm gonna like totally file that away for the future. But I think it's one of those things that's often missed in the need to, in your feeling, your need to respond quickly to a problem or an issue or an opportunity, but there is a lot of wisdom in taking pause and working to make sure that what you're proposing is really what's needed for the situation and for your partners.
Right. I bet everybody on this panel has had some kind of, just for lack of a better phrase, a log frame moment. And I'm wondering if any of you would like to elaborate on what that looked like, because I think log frame moments actually set us up to be the actual leaders that we're supposed to be, not the leaders that we look around and say, oh, that's the kind of leader I want to be. But the log frame moment actually shows you, it reveals who you are, I think, in that moment and how you're going to grow. So I wonder if anybody has anything to add to that. Thought about that. Well, I have something to ask if you don't. So I'm curious, Cameron, because I know all of you some better than others, but I know that everybody here kind of has interests in a variety of things. But I think that you have done a wild variety of things, and I'm just curious about how you come to those new ideas. Are you attracted to something because you're curious about it, or are you attracted to something because you have a problem and you recognize you have to learn more about that in order to solve it? Just what's your process for choosing this, wide variety of
like how do you organize chaos or creativity or interests? I've actually, in the last couple of years, it's been really helpful to me to use, we use an advisory curriculum starting in our high school and then with our middle schoolers, and it's called Wayfinder. It's from the Stanford Design School, and you're shaking your head, Julie. So
I am. We had Laura McBain on yesterday. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, so in short, the intersection of something you're good at, something you care about and a need in the world and your skills. I mean, picture, called three circles in a Venn diagram. That's great. And so for me, I come back to that every once in a while. My most recent interest took me to outer space, not literally, but figuratively. And so I went back to school again in my 40s. But yeah, have just really become enamored with space. I think from, podcasts and books to, I did have, maybe it was a log frame moment when I read a chapter of The Future of Humanity by Michio Kaku, and he had a chapter about how one day we would be mining minerals from outer space and the moon and asteroids. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's it. Of course my kids are going to be doing this in 2040 and 50. And so I was like, I have to learn about this now.
Okay.
So I went back to school and I take one class at a time, and it just keeps my mind sharp, I'd say. And I want to model being a lifelong learner for the K-12 students at Bennett as well. And I do want to partner with a couple of our upper school teachers to help expose kids to outer space, whether we watch documentaries and then, ask all the questions you have around that, and then how do we expose them to outer space? It's just one of, I'm sure I'll come up with something else 2 years from now, but space I think is sticking. You can turn ice into hydrogen and oxygen in outer space, and you've got water to drink, water to grow things, propellant for the supply chain from the moon to Mars. You have everything you need right there in space. And I think it's closer than we all realize. And even if you don't think so, for our children and certainly their children, there's just no question about it. So yeah, I'm enamored with space and it intersects with my work at Bennett.
That's great. That's great. Noah, I know that, you've had a lot of life experience as a musician. And I think like playing jazz might be the most collaborative musical experience ever. It's never the same. It's completely grounded in the present, in that moment. And I just have an idea that has probably influenced the way you work. Even though I don't know if you're playing all the time now or not.
Yeah, not so much anymore.
Yeah. I guess that's my corollary to that question. Like, are you missing it? And what are you listening to?
Yeah, I mean, to just kind of start about my background, I guess the first thing is I was a very interested student, but never a very successful student, because I always spent more time, rather than just learning, thinking about how my educators and teachers were delivering the information to me. I was really always interested in being a teacher. So I just viewed learning through that lens, what works? How could they say this differently? Why did it work for me and not the person to my right? So on and so forth. So I always kind of took that mentality of how one delivers information being as much a part of the learning experience as the learner. So that kind of shaped part of my thinking. And yeah, I was a jazz musician in the freelance world for more than 20 years in New York and San Francisco. And to be a successful musician always requires a balance of leading and following, certainly in the jazz world. It's true day to day in terms of your career, from gig to gig. But I think as a musician, even in terms of phrase to phrase, you lead and then you follow, and it's that constant play. Sometimes you take charge, sometimes you follow, sometimes you blend, and sometimes you stand out, and you kind of have to always balance that. And as a musician in social situations, meaning bands and ensembles, not a solo performer, you're always working to be collaborative and always working collaboratively towards a common goal. And I think that experience certainly shaped the way I think about being a leader. Certainly to Eric's point, I always looked for the best musicians possible to join my band because I knew it would make me sound better. And I never, much like Miles Davis, right? He played just a few notes and then had John Coltrane right next to him stage. And it was that contrast that actually gave his voice validity. And I mean, this is totally random, but it just popped into my brain. Like when you're young and you're the captain on in a kickball game, you always try to choose the best player because it's going to help you out. And I think somehow once our egos and our teaching get in the way of that, we stop thinking about being collaborative. Raising two kids and being an executive director and being a homeschooler doesn't give me much time to practice, but I actually did take out my trumpet for the first time in many years. And I balance, listening to, I really have a wide variety of things I listen to. Sometimes it's crazy things that my kids are listening to and I have no idea what that is. But I'm still, still rooted in the great jazz classics. I have a pretty wide interest in all sorts of music. But yeah, it's certainly being a musician has kind of shaped every fabric in my body of thinking about how to collaboratively work with others.
You know the song Children's World by Maceo Parker?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when you were just talking about you went back from music to your kids, and for some reason that song jumped into my head because it's a profound, it's a really moving song. It's super beautiful, but I immediately made a connection to what I see in my kids right now. Like in a children's world, what happens in school, in most schools versus what's happening in their school. And Julie, one of the questions you asked me to think about is like where my inspiration comes from.
Yep.
One of my inspirations comes from the traditional experience and the things that were very frustrating in that experience. And yeah, I hear you, Cameron.
All kind of just, oh boy. Yeah.
Even with what you're just saying, I think about I'm a parent also. I have my daughter's turning 22. She's going to she's 22. She's going to graduate college in a couple months. And then I have a 7-year-old and twin 4-year-olds. And the 4-year-olds play a 15-hour game of improv all day, every day, and one. Whatever you're doing, it's an and one. And when I think about like truly being in a children's world, it is deep, it is experiential, it is back and forth, it is constantly figuring out the limits by breaking them, by going too far. And, you know, when we do all of our professional development in the last, I've worked with, 150, 200 districts in the last few years. And I just think about like all of that, we're constantly saying to the teachers on the first day, when do you have time and space to experiment? When do you have the space to practice what you're expected to model? Yeah, I can see, I'm going to hand this off right now.
No, I mean, I'm with you in so many ways there. I mean, we know from internationally benchmarked data that the amount of time you give your faculty to collaborate is highly correlated to outcomes, no matter what the pedagogical model is at the school, whether it's International Baccalaureate, traditional, sit in desks in rows, Montessori, Reggio Emilia, Waldorf, you name it. If you give the faculty time, it leads to great places. And Eric, yeah, we started Bennett a couple years after you started GCE. We're both in Chicago. But yeah, at Bennett, at first we had half days on Fridays, early dismissal. But we noticed Friday afternoons. we noticed that just didn't work well, I'll say. But we switched it to Wednesdays, and so we have early dismissal, and kids can still stay at school. We have dual working households, single parent households. Our kids can still stay at school, but that deep commitment to always doing what's right for the kids and the faculty and making time and space for them to collaborate is key. So we dedicate a half a day to that every week. And we're doing it now in distance learning virtually as well.
It's so interesting because I think that what you're talking about actually are lessons that the children are teaching us or trying to teach us all the time. You're talking about your kids in the day long, 15-hour improv. I think this is what if we're brave enough to be quiet and step back and listen to the kids, they're going to teach us this every single day. And it's so funny because when you were talking, I remembered that now it seems like a long time ago that my kids were in the classroom with us, but the second grade kids in our school have created this imaginary world called Yes and, kind of based on the improv principle of everything that comes to you. You say yes and you add something to it. And so there's this incredible imaginary land called Yes and when we were putting things together to send home to the kids so that they would have connection to each other, they asked that I make copies of all the pages that go into this enormous book that has all of the knowledge of Yes and in it. And it was, like 35 pages I was copying for, like I don't even want to talk about it, but it was a great reminder that, even on the edge of Earth Day tomorrow, that what kids are expecting, what kids want the world to be, what kids know the world should be, it's in their DNA. It's there. And if we listen to them, then, our own yes and is much more likely. And I think, this is what we're all after. I think it's funny that in this conversation with this group of people that, that's part of what we come to here in terms of the collaboration and the listening to kids and listening to each other. So I want to say that we use these words, innovation and leadership, and they, we all want that. We want people to lead us. We want to lead others. We have ideas of things that we'd like to create. We want things in the world. We want other people to create them. But these words, innovation and leadership, have kind of become, I don't know what they mean exactly anymore. Sometimes they're used by so many people in so many different ways. And I wonder for myself, and I'm going to ask you, if there's a better word for what you're aiming for, if there are one or two words that better describe what it is that you're hoping to do in the world.
Can
And
I jump on this real? I'm going to come out with
Yeah.
an opinion you guys can all push back on. Okay.
Great.
So I actually have strong feelings about this. I think innovation is not a word that I pursue. I have no interest in innovating to innovate. And I'll tell you that is partly due to things that have already been suggested on this call, but I've been an innovator. Being an innovator guarantees you nothing except that you won't be understood by a large section of pragmatists until later. So I don't innovate in any way to innovate. My brother, okay, here's an anecdote to help you understand what I think is that matters. Doing something better than it was done before, because it helps people grow and grow together. Like, very simply, why does this matter? Because of that. My brother came to our like third graduation or something that we had, and I was wearing, a terrible outfit that didn't quite fit. And, it was early in our game, and I was speaking to a bunch of people at the school, and it was still a beautiful graduation ceremony. And the kids do all this. We do final presentations. It's like totally run by the kids, and all that, like they do everything. As it's like Cameron, it's a co-created environment. So much of this is about the kids. It's, and at the end, my older brother, who has very few reasons to give me compliments, says to me, all the bells and whistles, all the ed tech stuff you guys have, this is old school Dewey in education. Like, you got it right. And the compliment in that was enormous, into the body. Like, what did we do? We actually removed all the other crap, all the things that people are the things you need to do it. And we focused on you and you and you and what matters in that.
Yep. I think we could talk for an hour about that, actually, because, I wonder how you get the message out to people that is actually what we want to do. That is what we want to do. And I think, here we sit in this conversation, and I think why isn't everybody, on board with this? Why does this feel new? Why does it feel new? It's in our gut. Every time you describe to somebody this kind of education, this kind of teaching, this kind of learning, there's like a big lot of nodding, and there's a lot of this feels right. And, on my best days, I get a tear in the eye from some of the people on the tour. They're like, this is what was lacking in my life. I want this for my kids. But then there's like a whole host of people who, at the end of the tour will still say, but, what about the spelling test? And I don't know what it is we say to them to help them to understand that. Any guidance is I'm open to it.
I mean, my thoughts here are that we need to let go of what we've been doing, for like 200 years. I mean, literally since almost 200 years, since the 1840s, sitting in desks and rows, being filled with information, to go to Eric's point about Dewey. Children are not vessels meant to be filled with information and to be motivated by, will this be on the test next week? Like, that doesn't work. And, we could go down, literally we could go way back to 1915 and Robert Frost, like, two paths diverge in the wood, and you take the road less traveled, and it makes all the difference. And that couldn't be more relevant for 2040 and 50 and 70, when 2/3 of the jobs that will exist then do not even exist today. So doing things that feel like what we all did as children in school, is not going to get it done. And I think to link it to something that's familiar, to link it to grading and assessment still, it's a different way to do it. So instead of letter-based grades, it's standards-based grades, or competency-based grading, or competency-based education. And you can walk parents to that, I believe, because we all know in our hearts, like you said, Julie, it's the right thing to do. But how do we know? I think it makes it easier for parents too, when you look at the coalition of schools that was started 5 years ago. I mean, it's 150 schools. It was started by every Ivy League school and Stanford that said, we used to have test scores to like try to level the playing field and make it equitable when you applied to school. So it didn't matter what neighborhood you were in or your upbringing. But now there's a digital locker where you can upload all your stuff. And over years, admissions officers get to know you and get to see what's your purpose in life. And is there at least that you might be thinking of as a young person at that point? And is there a match with the pointy student, with some really depthful interests and passions that combined give you purpose? So
Yep.
I think to see the coalition doing that and to see Ivy, Stanford, Northwestern, U of C, Caltech, I mean, go down the list, like that's just in 5 years, 150 schools saying test scores and GPA are not enough anymore. And no parent wants their kids to be without this other thing now, this coalition app. So I think there's a practical piece to share with parents as well.
Noah, yes.
So I've been thinking a lot about how we're going to define ourselves coming out of this situation. The arts, although I believe they're essential and part of humanity, that is non-negotiable. Certainly, they require disposable income and time and transportation, all sorts of things that are going to be challenging. So one of the things that I've been thinking about is we're never preparing people what to be, but we're preparing them how to be. And I think, through the arts practice, you learn how to practice, you learn how to listen, you learn how to overcome failure, how to collaborate, how to present, and all of those skills, and it's the same if you're an outdoor school or you're a global health organization. You are trying to prepare people to be successful in their world, whatever that may look like. And I think that's really where our argument comes in, is that we are preparing people to relate to the worlds and their fellow humans around them. And none of those skills ever get old. Collaborating is always going to be needed. Listening is always going to be needed. And you may be holding a violin or playing soccer or working in a forest, but we still can teach things that are going to be relevant and also very important skills to get jobs. We can make that argument as well. So we've been thinking a lot about, the arts are the platform and they are a big part of what we do, but in the end, that's not really what it's about.
So I think we're almost to the end of our time here, which I am really sad about, actually. But I'm wondering if there's a few words of encouragement out there for people who are thinking about, what's needed, what's still needed as we're moving through the world, and especially moving through the world in this really unique time. Just some words of encouragement to go ahead and think outside the box and create what's needed for yourself. And likely if you create something for yourself, it might be needed by others. So I don't know if you have something to offer there. I'd love to hear from everybody, really. Marie, you want to say something for everyone?
Oh, this feels like a profound moment that I wish I had profound words for. I will say that I have just appreciated all of the sentiments and contributions of everyone in this call. This has been an awesome way to spend an hour. So thank you.
Agreed.
So, so maybe I'll just say that there are exciting things in this moment to imagine how we could be better than we were. And we can think about how we can change. To Noah's point, I think he just kind of scratched the surface, and it's something that I think about on a daily basis in terms of equity of access, equity of outcomes, and thinking about as we innovate to make sure that those who don't have the same access aren't left behind. And so maybe I would just ask that in our excitement to imagine a world that is better than the world we're living in right now, how we can do that so that it is a shared better world, and that the things that we're imagining really can be of benefit to those of us in our own backyard and across the ocean.
Yeah. Beautiful. Anything to add to that, friends, or just a hearty thumbs up? Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, perfect.
Agreed. Well, as I said, this concludes the time for our panel today. I want to thank our gifted panelists for your incredibly generous sharing of all your wisdom. I learned so much today, so my selfish goal has been satisfied. And I'm sure that everybody who tuned in learned as much as I did. So thank you again. And I'll just say what we say when we close our meetings at Slate School. When we conclude our afternoon session, we always just go around the circle and sort of say positive rice to everybody. So I'll say positive rice to all of you, the panelists, positive rice to 6 continents. And I'll look for you back here at Slate School, I hope someday soon. So thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.
So,
Julie, thanks everyone.
Thanks.
I loved it. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
I got to figure out how to stop doing the Facebook. There we go. All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye.